the student section is chanting, "Fire Franklin."
I wasn't going to say that, but I remember that.
Yeah, I remember. "Fire Franklin." And now I'm walking around campus and the same students are, "Coach, you're the best."
You walked into a situation that may be the most complex that any head coach has ever walked into in the history of college football.
It was excitement, but it was also, concern about really what am I walking myself into. It's funny because everybody says, okay, you're taking this job under sanctions, so you're going to have time to build it. But then once the games start, nobody cares about that anymore.
I've also witnessed how you build relationships and the way you've helped me throughout my career. I've seen you do things that's not traditional for football coaches. I've seen you cry in front of the team. I've seen you talk about love. That's not normal for football coaches.
I've always been an emotional guy. I just have always believed that if the players know how much I truly care about them, then that's going to allow me to be really demanding and challenging on them because they know it's coming from a good place. When somebody really cares about you, they'll have the hard conversation with you.
If this place and this program is to win a national championship.
When?
What's that?
You said if. When we do it?
When?
That's a good question.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Next Up podcast. I'm Adam Breneman. We're in State College today at the Penn State football facility, actually in the running back room right now. Rearranged this whole thing for us to have Penn State head coach James Franklin on the podcast. I've been wanting to have Coach Franklin on for a long time. I played for him a few years ago, well, more than a few years ago now, but I'm excited to talk to him about all things college football, his journey, when he took this job at Penn State. The job he's done, I think, is one of the best head coaching jobs we've seen in the last decade of college football. All the success he's had with where this program was just 10 years ago is really remarkable. Before we get to the pod, please subscribe to this podcast, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen. Press that subscribe button. It allows me to go around the country and have one of the very best guests in college football, just like Coach Franklin. Before we get to the podcast, I got to tell you guys about the presenting sponsor for today's episode, Athletic Greens. Listen, I've been super picky about who we allow to sponsor this pod because I want to promote things I actually use. And when Athletic Greens reached out, I was fired up. I literally use Athletic Greens every single day. The reason I use it every day is because it's just one scoop and I get all the vitamins and minerals I need. 75 plus nutrients, vitamins, minerals, a bunch of other stuff that I don't even know what it is, but it's great for you. Since I started taking Athletic Greens daily, I feel better, my energy is better, my digestion is better. And as a guy who travels a ton, it's hard to get my vitamins and minerals in. With Athletic Greens, it's as easy as one scoop a day. As I've gotten farther away from my playing career, I now take my health more seriously, and Athletic Greens has been a game changer for me. So if you want to take control of your health, try Athletic Greens AG1 today and get 5 free travel packs and a 1-year supply of vitamin D free when you use my link, drinkag1.com/nextup. Again, that's 1-year supply of vitamin D free and 5 free travel packs when you use my link, drinkag1.com/nextup. And guys, supporting our sponsors supports me and allows me to do this podcast as consistently and at a high level like we have been for all of you. So please go purchase some AG1 at drinkag1.com/nextup. Let's go talk to Coach.
Got a whole crew, huh?
Yeah, we got everyone here,
Good to see you, man.
How we doing?
James Franklin, Coach. Good to see you.
That cool?
Sir. Yeah.
How things going?
Good. Where'd you get these?
Greg grabbed them. I don't know.
Malta.
They're nice.
Academic stuff.
Oh, yeah, they're nice.
We raided Todd's office.
Yeah, they're nice. They're nice.
How things going? Good?
Good. Yeah, this is kind of the last week, and then we get some time off. So.
Remember when June used to be the easy month for coaches?
No, not anymore. It's crazy.
But I appreciate you doing this. I'm excited.
problem.
I've wanted to have you on for a while, and a lot I want to talk to you about. So I appreciate, especially during this time of the year. It's not easy to get coaches to sit down for a while.
Happy to.
Yeah. So, where I want to start is 10 years ago when you took this job. I remember being in this building in the team meeting room when you walked in for the first team meeting as the head coach of Penn State. I remember like it was yesterday. What was going through your mind when you walked in that door?
Yeah, a couple things. I mean, first of all, excitement. Growing up in the state of Pennsylvania, playing football in the state of Pennsylvania. I came to camp at Penn State when they used to have those huge camps over in the IM fields. And so it was kind of like surreal. I never really thought that Penn State was a realistic option. I always thought it would stay kind of in the family, someone connected closely with the program. So when this happened, it was surreal in a lot of ways. and although I love Vanderbilt and I had a great experience there, I knew I was going to have to leave at some point, and then you hope you're leaving for a job like Penn State. Yeah. So it was surreal, but I would also say I didn't really know what I was walking into. Yeah. Because with the sanctions and all those types of things, I didn't really understand a lot of the details. And a lot of the details now may not seem as big of a deal, like being able to transfer and keep your scholarship and play right away, because now with the transfer portal, that's no big deal. Yeah. But back then, it was crazy. I remember we only had 5 scholarship offensive linemen, which
bad.
People that understand football, they're like 5. Yeah. So it was excitement, but it was also, concern about really what am I walking myself into.
What was maybe the one thing that surprised you the most when you got here? You had the expectation or the thing that you said, we have to change this right away.
Well, I think the first thing, the surprise was things that I found out about the sanctions that they didn't tell me during the interview process.
They downplayed that a little bit.
Yeah, like that we had 3 players walking around on campus still on football scholarship that I couldn't replace. Just some crazy things like that. I don't even think I knew about the game in Ireland. Like my first game is Dublin, Ireland. I'm like, can we just have a game like, in state college or at least somewhere in the United States? But, I guess when I got here, I was shocked at how far behind the facilities were. Technology was. Yeah. The bones were phenomenal, but I was kind of shocked about things like that. I just, that was surprising to me. And then I think the other thing was the players. The players themselves kind of had a wall up, because I think if I remember correctly, I was like the 5th head coach in like 27 months if you count interim head coaches and all those types of things. So the players were really tight after going through a ton of adversity, as you know. But it was almost like, okay, here's another head coach that's standing up in front of us, and there was a trust that had to be established with them that was harder to do than when I first went to Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt had no success. So literally, as soon as they saw that I cared and I had a plan, they were all in. They were all in. And at Penn State, because we'd never really hit rock bottom, and there'd been so much turnover after no turnover for 50 years, there was a wall buildup that needed to be kind of broken down.
Yeah, and that's the next thing I wanted to ask you about. I've said this a lot. I remember talking to you about it when during those 2 years I was hurt and I would talk to you in your office a lot. You walked into a situation that may be the most complex that any head coach has ever walked into in the history of college football. That's a big statement, but it was as complex as it comes with sanctions, with the players. You mentioned it. I remember the locker room. Even a lot of those guys came there to play for Bill O'Brien, and then he leaves, and you got the wall was up in the locker room, and you had to come tear it down. So 2-part question. 1, was there ever a moment when you were like, what the hell did I just walk into? And number 2, how did you go about tearing that wall down? Because I think it happened relatively quickly.
Well, it didn't feel like it happened relatively quickly, but yeah, I think there was a moment I'm like, this is more significant and more challenging than I realized. Weren't able to go to a bowl in year 1. We find out halfway through the year that we're going to be able to go. I think we had 56 scholarship players, 5 scholarship offensive linemen. Players could quit and leave and transfer with immediate eligibility. Players could quit and keep their scholarship and stay. There was really a divide on campus and in the community still over what had happened. So it was more challenging, than I realized, but there was still a really good nucleus. And then the other thing that I don't think a lot of people realize is me and Billy O'Brien were pretty close. We were on the same staff at the University of Maryland, so I was able to talk to him probably probably about 10 times before taking the job to kind of have an understanding of what I was walking into in terms of the players and things like that. But a complicated place at a complicated time. There's no doubt about it.
You know, this place too has so much history and tradition, and for a long time before you got here, it had one way they were doing it for a long time, and it was a lot of people felt like they knew how this program should be run. Then you walk in here and you have to balance. You have your way that you know works, right? You have the model. You did it at Vanderbilt, but you also have to balance the tradition and history of this place that had the same head coach for so long and has all that. How did you go about navigating that with the community, with just the complexities and the tradition this place has? Yeah,
this place is change averse, right? Yeah. Like it has been for a long time. Right. But, you know, I think a lot of places that have a deep tradition, of history and success, there are a lot of places that are like that, right? So I think that's one of the things that I think we did a pretty good job of early on is how do you pay respect to the past and the history, but still move the program forward and make it more of a current, college football program and model that has a chance to thrive and be successful. That was a battle. The facilities were a battle. I remember when I first am, complaining or talking or trying to kind of get people all on board that we need to update the facilities.
Why?
And people are like, why? And the interesting thing is, it's funny. It depends on who's telling the story, right? When Penn State built this facility, it was the nicest building in all of football, college or the NFL, and people came from all over the country to study it and see it. But over time, that kind of had been lost. There was a period where Penn State kind of had the best of everything, and we needed to get back to that. So it was challenging and it was surprising.
What was the moment during your time here where you thought to yourself, where it clicked? It was like, this is going to work. We're building this thing, and finally it feels like we're getting over the hump.
Yeah, it probably was that year 3. It's year 3, and it's funny because everybody says, okay, you're taking this job under sanctions, so you're going to have time to build it. But then once the games start, nobody cares about that anymore. Nobody cares about that anymore. So it's year 3. And there was some people, I guess, that probably felt like we should have had more success at this stage of where we were at, and we kind of had some breakthroughs. People forget. I say all the time, we lost to Ohio State twice by 1 point. One with 2 controversial calls, and maybe if we get one of those wins, maybe it happens sooner. But in 2016, we're able to kind of really take a step, win some big games, win some close games. Things fall right in the conference as well, and we end up, obviously going to the Big Ten championship. We're getting our butts beat by Wisconsin. I think we're down by 21 points. But that team all year long, we had struggled in first halves and flurried back, and we were able to do it again on that type of stage, end up winning the Big Ten championship. And I think that was kind of the moment where people stopped talking about the challenges and the issues of the past, and it was like, we had moved forward. And I was extremely proud because with taking the job, people were saying it was going to take till now.
10 years.
It was going to take 10 years for the program to ever resemble what it had looked like in the past. So the fact that we were able to do it in year 3, I was really proud of that.
I remember people saying that Penn State wouldn't be able to beat Temple for 10 years, and all the tweets when that stuff happened. And then it was funny how high the expectation got so quickly when you got here. And that's just the nature of college football we're in now, right? Yeah, but I think guys like yourself and Christian Hackenberg, I got to give him credit as well. You guys, specifically you as a Pennsylvania kid, decided to stay home and commit to Penn State when it wasn't a sexy decision. Now guys are committing, everybody's going crazy, and it makes sense. Why wouldn't you go to Penn State, right? But you did it
at a time that was significant in our history. And I think that's why, yourself and Hack, I think will be beloved forever in this community and in this state, because you stood up for Penn State at a time where it was needed.
Yeah.
So, kudos to you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
I appreciate it, Coach. Before we get back to the pod, I want to tell you guys about our new sponsor, the first sponsor of the Next Up podcast with Adam Breneman, Manscaped. And the exclusive offer I've secured for all of you. Well, you have to check out the Performance Package 4.0. The Performance Package 4.0 has everything you could ever need to keep you looking your best. It comes with the Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, the Weed Whacker ear and nose trimmer, Crop Preserver ball deodorant, Crop Reviver toner, Performance boxer briefs, and even a travel bag to hold all your tools. Trust me, guys, you don't want to miss out on this bundle. So join over 8 million men worldwide who use Manscaped with an exclusive 20% off and free shipping on manscaped.com with code ADAMB, ADAMB. Put it in manscaped.com when you're checking out. 20% off, that's a huge discount, and free shipping on your order. So I need all of you to show them tons of support by supporting Manscaped and using that code ADAMB. It's going to help me, help us a ton, help us grow this podcast and keep getting great guests. So shout out Manscaped. Use the code ADAMB at manscaped.com for 20% off and free shipping. The one thing I've always respected about you, and I noticed it during the couple years I was here with you, is how committed you are to how you do things. The process, you had such a clear plan and vision. I mean, even from the repetition of the things you say with the core values every day and talking about relationships all the time. And I watched you do that, even when things weren't going well in 2014 and 2015. You never changed anything. What allowed you to stay so committed to your plan for success? And how did you know so well that was going to work?
Well, I think that goes back to an earlier question about kind of some of the challenges early on. Typically young people feel like there's only one way to be successful, right? And this is what we know. So they're resistant to change. On top of that, for me, I took a job at Vanderbilt, one winning season in 30 years before we had gotten there. I'd gone 2-10, I think, the 2 previous years before we showed up on campus. And I was just naive enough to take that job and confident enough. And then we were able to have success there. So I knew that if we could go to a place like Vanderbilt and have success at a place that never really had it before, in the SEC, obviously very well-respected conference, that we had to do it there with less. So if we can do it there with less, now let's come to Penn State and do more with more. Yeah. But the success that we had there really gave me confidence in our model and how we do it. It really did. So coming to Penn State, it was, okay, we got to figure out the institutional knowledge. We got to figure out the community knowledge as quickly as we possibly can. But the model of how we do football, that I was confident in. And as you know, if it's major college football or the NFL or a business that you're running, you better have conviction in what you're doing and how you're doing it, or the guys will never buy in. Yeah. And that's something that I've always had, is great conviction in what we do and how we do it.
I was down to see Brent Pry yesterday at Virginia Tech, and we were talking about just the whole time at Penn State, talked about you a bunch and what he learned from you. And I asked him about what the turning point was that he saw, and he brought up that 2016 Minnesota game. Remember being down at halftime after being, I think, 2-2. And I was telling him, I remember being at UMass, and I used to check the scores at halftime of the Penn State game because all my boys were playing. Yeah. I remember seeing Penn State was down at halftime to Minnesota and thinking, this isn't good. Do you remember, what do you remember about that game, that feeling, and then winning in overtime? That's really, when I think of when things turn around, it was that game that turned the trajectory around.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. We're 2-2. We're down at halftime. The student section is chanting, "Fire Franklin."
I wasn't going to say that, but I remember that.
Yeah, I remember. Fire Franklin, right? And we go in at halftime and we come out and find a way to beat a good Minnesota team. They were a good football team. We find a way to win that game. Saquon makes an unbelievable play on a screen pass. And then And then we don't lose again. We win, I think, 9 straight or something like that. We go on a run and go on a tear. And now I'm walking around campus and the same students are on fire. Like, oh, coach, you're the best. We've always been with you. I'm like, no, I remember seeing your face in the stands. But I think obviously that was a really important time, and we were able to gain confidence and momentum and build. Mm-hmm. And the interesting thing too is, like, you think about that first recruiting class. I got the job like January 18th, like as the worst time to get a job. And you think back about how many of those guys in that first class ended up playing in the NFL, ended up having really good careers. And, I say that because I think about the play that Saquon made. Yeah. And Saquon, people forget, when I got the job, was committed to Rutgers. So these guys like this that you're able to kind of flip and get on board, the reality is I can have as much conviction as I want. If I don't have guys like yourself in the locker room that can go out and execute the plan, you don't have a chance.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, too, about your philosophy around relationships. It's something you talk about a lot. You say the program's built on it. I've also witnessed how you build relationships, and even with some of my friends and teammates that played for you, even with myself, and how I played for you I'm using that term loosely. I didn't even play for you. I was on your team for 2 years, and the way you've helped me throughout my career, and just I've seen you build and keep relationships with players, and I've seen you do things that's not traditional for football coaches. I've seen you cry in front of the team. I've seen you talk about love, and that's not normal for football coaches. Where does that philosophy come from, and why is that so important to you?
Yeah, so a couple things. It probably starts with my college coach, Denny Dowds, who was the head coach at East Stroudsburg for 51 years. When I got into the profession, I lived with him and his wife. Mm-hmm. We sit on the back porch and eat Klondike bars. But I'm also just a big believer, you got to be true to who you are, and you got to be authentic. And most importantly, you got to be comfortable in your own skin. And I think people are drawn and attracted to people that are comfortable in their own skin, even if you're a weirdo. You know what I mean? But you're comfortable with who you are. So for me, I've always been an emotional guy. I've always been a passionate guy. My wife is not. Like, we'll be sitting there watching TV and a Hallmark commercial will come on and I get emotional. She looks over. Yeah, she looks over like, are you kidding me right now? But that's just kind of who I am. But back to the relationships. I mean, I think for a lot of us, right, you get into this game and you get into this profession and you think about the impact that coaches have had on your life. I grew up in a single, parent home with my mom and my sister, and I think about the impact that college coaches had on me. Mm-hmm. And to me, it was always about the relationship first, the relationship with my teammates and the relationship with my coaches. So from that point on, I just really felt like if we could start everything based on relationships, and when you study kind of the most successful businesses and things like that, it can, Beaver Stadium is awesome, 107,000. Our weight room that we just finished is phenomenal. But at the end of the day, it's about the people in the stadium. It's about the people in the Lash building. So I just have always believed that if the players know how much I truly care about them and their futures and their families, then that's going to allow me to be really demanding and challenging on them because they know it's coming from a good place. Now, there's issues with that. I almost didn't take the Penn State job because I had a really hard time saying bye to those guys at Vanderbilt because I was invested in them. So that's just something that's really worked for me. I can be really demanding and challenging on people and push them to a place they need to go because they know how much I care about them, their families, and their futures.
Yeah. That's always a tough balance, I think, for coaches. When I was with Herm Edwards, he would always say, you can't be their friend. That's what he would always say to the young coaches. And you have young coaches too. How do you balance that, wanting to be a player's coach, wanting them to love you, wanting them to like you, have that relationship, but also they need to respect you, and you need to be demanding and be able to have those tough conversations? How do you balance that? And what's your advice for young coaches that have to deal with that dynamic as well?
Yeah, I do not want to be their friends. and I will say it's just like it's funny, people come, we have a camp, and I always speak to the parents in the beginning of camp. Like, I'm always trying to convince them, like, stop going down there to watch your son run a slow 40. Come talk to me, because I'm going to tell you about this process, and I'm going to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
And to me, that's a little bit of a problem with our society right now, is you got way too many parents trying to be their kids' friends rather than their parents. And what I say all the time is, in a healthy relationship, whether it's your wife or whether it's your parents or whether it's your coach, just because you have a really good relationship and you're really close doesn't mean it's always puppies, rainbows, hugs, and kisses. Like, when somebody really cares about you, they'll have the hard conversation with you. They'll push you outside of your comfort zone. They're going to tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. And to me, that's when you have a chance to make an impact in people's lives. And it's just like I'm talking to the leadership council and the captains about right now. You have to be willing to hold your teammates accountable. And I don't think enough people do that now. Are you willing to have the tough conversations? So to me, you know, I want them to know I care. But
not your buddy.
I'm not your buddy. I'm not your friend. And I'm willing to have these conversations with you. And hopefully they can interpret as, okay, this guy cares about me. That's why he's having the conversation.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I always think that great head coaches, great leaders they're one, great communicators, and two, they can relate to a range of people, right? Different backgrounds. How does your background, your childhood, the way you were raised, impact how you recruit and how you relate to players?
Yeah, so I think my background is probably one of my greatest strengths, right, is I'm biracial. My dad was African American, was in the Air Force, was stationed in Manchester, England, went to England, met my mom, they eloped to Ireland, got married, he brought her back to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, started popping out beige babies, me and my sister. But I do think that's one of my greatest strengths. Although my mom really raised me, all my family in the United States is African American. All my mom's family's in England. So I was just raised around a very diverse background, grew up in a fairly predominantly white area. So I am very comfortable really in any setting. And whether it is a rural area, whether it's an urban area, whether it's religious differences, racial differences, whatever it may be, socioeconomic differences, I'm very comfortable. So I think there is power in that. I'm very comfortable going to your home and talking to you and your family. I'm very comfortable going into an inner city situation. And I think there's times where coaches may say, hey, this is a delicate subject. I'm not comfortable talking about this. Let me go get another coach on my staff to handle this topic. I've never had to do that. And I think that is important. And I'm not saying just being biracial is the reason I can do that. I think really anybody can do that, but I do think it's made me comfortable having these conversations and maybe challenging people on certain topics at an earlier point in my life and career that maybe others weren't.
Let me ask you this. How have you changed or evolved as a coach since maybe I was on your team in 2014?
Yeah, I think a number of things. I think probably the biggest thing is I'm still very passionate. I'm still very emotional. But I'll probably now take a deep breath before like going off.
I never heard that.
And really probably even more so at Vanderbilt than coming here, because I really felt like when I came here, because of all the rules and the sanctions and players being able to leave at any point, if you coach them too hard, they could just bounce. So I felt like when I was first getting here is how do I navigate, not just Penn State, but how do I navigate these rules? But I just feel like over time, you just gain some perspective and you gain some experience. And although my emotions are important to me and my passion is important to me, I think the older you get, you just say, okay, I'm going to take a deep breath before doing it, before making a decision. And then I think the other thing is I've always been a communicator, but every decision I make, major decision, I want to hear from the players. I want to hear from the staff. I want to hear from the coaches. For me to make the best decisions, from the AD, the president, for me to make the best decisions for the overall organization, I must hear all these perspectives. And that kind of goes back to diversity, right?
Yeah.
Why is diversity important? Because I need to hear all these different perspectives so I don't have any blind spots, so that ultimately I can make the best decisions for Penn State. And I've always been comfortable with that, but I'm more comfortable than ever. And there's sometimes I may not agree with you right now, but I sleep on it the next morning. I go, you know what?
Yeah.
You were right.
Yeah.
You were right. That's the better way to do this.
Before we get back to the pod, let me tell you guys about my favorite way to make money on sports and fire on sports. It's Prize Picks. Prize Picks is sponsoring this pod, and I love it because I actually use it all the time. I've been trying different sports books, different daily fantasy apps, and Prize Picks is by far the best. Prize Picks is different than regular sports books or sports betting because on Prize Picks, you're picking players, not teams. So if you know sports, know ball, know what players are going to ball out, you can make tons of money. On Prize Picks, each player has a set projected total for a stat. Let's say points, rebounds. If it's Steph Curry, 30 points, you pick higher or lower for Steph Curry. Super fun, and you can make tons of money. I've been ripping on it, and I have a special promo code for you guys to get a $100 deposit bonus with the code NEXTUP. Use the code NEXTUP when you download Prize Picks, or click the link in the description. It'll do it automatically for you. Code NEXTUP gets you a $100 deposit bonus so you can fire on sports on Prize Picks. Let's rock on Prize Picks. Now back to the pod. After the 2021 season, you signed a 10-year contract for a lot of money and made a long-term commitment to this place. You also did it when I think the AD transition was happening, right? You weren't quite sure who the athletic director was going to be, weren't quite sure, I believe the school president transition was happening as well. You know, you talk about alignment a lot, but you also didn't know when you committed to this place long-term who was going to be your boss. What made you believe in Penn State so much that you were willing to sign that deal without knowing who was going to be in charge?
Yeah, I don't recommend it. I've done this multiple times now. I took the Penn State job originally with an interim
Dave
president
Joyner, right?
and an interim AD, Dave Joyner.
Yeah.
Exactly right. I'm very thankful for Dave. But then again, I signed a 10-year contract, and the president had announced his retirement, and then the AD decided to retire. So once again, here I am. But I think to your point, a guy by the name of Matt Schuyler. And Matt is the chair of the board. And ultimately, that's my boss. It's funny, the players always say, well, you're the boss. No, I just work for different people, right? Yeah. And Matt Schuyler is the chair of the board at Penn State. And we've been talking for years about alignment. And Matt essentially runs Hilton Worldwide, lives in Northern Virginia, has been awesome. And me and Matt been talking about alignment for a long time, and he just kept telling me to be patient and be patient. I'm like, well, there's not a whole lot of patience in this industry. But basically, you know, I made that commitment to him and the board, and they went out and hired two unbelievable, you know, people. Neely Bendaputi, Dr. Bendaputi, if you haven't met her yet, you ought to do one of these with her. She is a ball of positive energy, and any room she comes in just takes over the room with her infectious energy, not only for Penn State, but for young people and students. And then we went out and hired Pat Kraft. Yeah. And to have an AD who played football in the Big Ten and gets it, and is aggressive, is what we really needed here at Penn State. So we have alignment now for the first time, you know, that I've ever been a head coach, back to Vanderbilt and now Penn State. And it's rejuvenated me in a lot of ways when I didn't even really know I needed to be rejuvenated.
Yeah. You know, one part of the coaching carousel I think fans don't realize is anytime there's a big school that comes open, your name gets thrown in by the media, right? USC, other jobs, your name's been rumored around. Is it true, and I believe it is, that sometimes those conversations are really used to get what you really need out of Penn State and to be used as leverage with Penn State so you can build this program the way you want to build it?
Yeah, so I think that's an important point, right? It does a couple things. It creates leverage with where you're at, but it also allows you to see clearly what the commitment level is. And for me, it's really never been the finances. Don't get me wrong. I know that's a part, and you threw that out there in the beginning, and I get that. But for me, if you really study all my contracts were about how do we put the program in the best position to be successful. And it's funny you bring that up because at Vanderbilt, I remember having that conversation with the AD. I was there 3 years and had 3 different contracts all 3 years. And the AD said that to me. Your contract allows me to get some things done in the athletic department that I need to get done. And your contract allows me to have conversations with the president, with the chancellor, with the board, whatever it may be. So yeah, there is a part of that for sure. But I think it kind of gives clarity to everybody. But it's funny, a lot of times coaches get put in a tough position because you're asked about it. Well, I can't control the fact that my name's been brought up or somebody's had this conversation. But yeah, it can be useful. It can be useful for the university. It can be useful for the athletic department. It could be useful for the coach to kind of see where he stands and is there true commitment. I talk about that all the time, and I think it's very, very important. There's very few schools in the country that it's like this. Does the commitment level match the expectations? And, a lot of schools, it doesn't. And I actually think it'd be fair if the president AD would come out and say, listen, I know what the fans' expectation levels, our commitment doesn't match that. But the coach a lot of times is held to that standard.
You talk about getting a lot of yeses now with Pat Kraft in charge of the athletic department. What's an example of some of those yeses that you get? Because sometimes they're little things, right? They're the extra staff member. They're maybe with the transfer portal, you got to build out another personnel department. What are some of the yeses that you get now with Pat Kraft in charge?
Yeah, so it's probably better to illustrate it, to use both, right? Over time, you get all these no's, these little no's, and they wear on you. And some of them are financial, and I get it. There's budgetary issues that have to be factored in. But some of them are not. They're just philosophical decisions, either in the athletic department or on the campus. Decisions that need to be made. And we would get a lot of no's. And a lot of times I didn't understand why they were no's, right? And with Pat, over the last year, it's amazing just how many more yeses we're going to get. And I guess I'll give you an example. So a few years back, we lost a big-time recruit that really wanted to come here. But one of the sticking points for him and his family was all the other schools that we were recruiting against, the freshman football players were in singles. Their dorms were singles. And at Penn State, they were always the traditional dorm, 2 in one room, the bathroom down the hallway. Yeah, you know. So that was something I've been trying to get done for 9 years. Literally just got it done this year. And we lost a recruit to another school, was a high-profile recruit, and he went there and had a great career and then got drafted into the NFL. And what people don't understand is that guy may have made one play in one game that could have been the difference between us making the playoffs or not, or getting into a Big Ten championship game or not, or beating a certain team that we've lost to by 1 point. That could have been the difference. And all those little no's add up, just like all those little yeses add up. And right now there's more yeses than ever, and I think that's an example.
Since you've been here, you've, I think, four 11-win seasons, 3 New Year's 6 bowl wins. I got the stats in front of me. Won a Big Ten championship. And at a time when this was a tough place to do it at. You brought it out of the dark ages. I still feel like there's somewhat of a perception in the national media that this place hasn't reached its full potential. Do you believe that this program and where it's at gets enough credit nationally?
Well, I think it depends on who you're talking to. I think the people that covered Penn State and really understood what Penn State went through, those people, I think, totally get it because they're keeping it in perspective. The program wasn't even supposed to be anywhere near this for 10 years. So I'm very proud of that, and the people that I talk to are very aware. But I think what happens is when you've been as close that we have. We win the Big Ten championship in 2016, don't get into the playoffs. Ohio State does.
Yeah.
When you've been as close as we have been, I get it. People like, okay, you got it back, now take the next step. Well, that's harder than people realize, especially when you don't have the alignment that we just got done discussing. But I tell people all the time, like, if you're outside of the top 25 and you're trying to get into the top 25, that's hard. When you get inside to the top 25, you're trying to get inside the top 15, that's hard. Those are big jumps. But when you get into the top 10, that jump from the top 10 into the top 4 is much wider than those other jumps are. So when you're scratching and clawing and the margin of error is so small, all those things add up, and that alignment is critical.
Yeah. I want to talk about NIL for a little bit. And I've said for a long time that Penn State on paper should be a leader in NIL with the fan base, all the community support. How would you assess where Penn State is in the NIL department?
Well, to your point, one of the things that's really powerful that a lot of people don't know about Penn State is all of the Commonwealth campuses across the state of Pennsylvania that used to be feeder, really feeder institutions for the university, but that all became their own, institutions, four-year institutions. That is powerful. And none of them have football. So they're all Penn State football fans. So when you talk about 750,000 living alumni, there is power in those numbers and with the brand, but we got to tap into it. And it's not just Penn State. There's a lot of schools that I know that have really taken a lot of pride in how they have done things and following the rules and all these things from an NCAA perspective. It is a major shift. It is a major shift to change your mind to say, you're telling me now we can give players, money. So getting people on board with that. The other thing is for the first 2 years, we weren't bold and aggressive with that rule. And I don't care what industry you're in, when the rules change, you better adapt and you better adapt quickly. And we didn't do that. So I would say 2 years ago, we were way behind. 3 years ago, we were way behind. In the last year, we're starting to make some significant progress, but we're 2 years behind. I think Pat Kraft has recognized that, has done a great job of going out and educating our people. That's what we're doing as a football program as well. But we need all of the Penn Staters worldwide to understand this is where we're at. And again, back to that commitment level versus expectations, this is a really good example. And if all 750,000 alumni would just do something, there's tremendous power in that.
When it comes to the transfer portal, how has really the portal combined with NIL, how has it changed your overall philosophy from a recruiting standpoint, roster management standpoint, and it's even changed your staff structure, and also the need to win right now, and maybe that's taking more transfers versus building this program for success for the long haul? How do you balance all that with the portal?
Yeah, I look at it, a little bit like people used to back in the old days with junior colleges, where you'd go to the junior college to solve an immediate problem, but you didn't want to build your program that way. We kind of approach transfer portal the same way. We hope our culture is good, that guys will stay and still grow and evolve and mature within the program and feel like they can achieve all of their dreams here. And have a maturity with them and have a relationship with them that you can be honest, with them. So that's the first part. The second part is we're going to go into the transfer portal like the junior colleges to solve problems where we have immediate needs. And for us, a lot of times it has been with young men that we recruited on the front end. So there's already an established relationship, which I think also helps reduce risk. We know what we're bringing into the program. Now, I say that if we have a year where our transfer portal numbers spike and they spike late, then we're probably going to have to go into the transfer portal because that's the only option at that point to solve those problems. But the other thing is back to the NIL. If you look, the NIL with the top players coming out of the transfer portal, that's where that NIL is probably quarterbacks in high school recruiting.
You got leverage.
And transfer portal is probably where the NIL is most impactful. And for us right now, we don't really have the NIL structure to support that. But also philosophically, I don't know if I necessarily want to build my team through transfer portal alone as well. But there needs to be a balance. If we got a need and we can go get somebody that can really help us, we got to be able to do what we need to do.
Yeah, some schools just had to change the way they were paying players, right?
Yeah, well, let's be honest. The schools that had a culture of giving already, they just changed. Well, yeah, I think that's the truth, right? They were used to it, whether it was legal or not. They've already got a culture of that, and they just went from doing it illegally to legally. I know it sounds like a nice way to say it, but it's the reality of it.
Yeah, that's great. I want to ask you about your family. I know how important they are to you. I remember your girls when they were young, being around the building when I was here, and your wife. How do you balance the need to build this program as a championship program, while also having a family at home? I mean, I know the rigors of this job, and I know one of your core values is must be willing to sacrifice, right? And there's a lot of sacrifice that goes into it. How do you balance that? How do you make sure that you're present at home, but also can build this program the right way?
Yeah, well, I think a couple things. I think number one, being in state college helps with that because literally, if I wanted to run and have lunch with my kids at school, I could do that. Like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Like it's not like some places where it's 20 minutes or 45 minutes based on traffic. Like we don't really have those issues. Or my wife and kids come into the office, but there's also, you got to build that as part of your culture. Like I've been places that say, oh, we're a family, but nobody's comfortable bringing their family into the building. So like, you brought up Brent Pry. I remember Brent Pry, me chasing his daughters down the hallway. And I wanted my wife and kids to be in the facility as much as possible because I know there's some nights that if they don't come by the facility, by the time I get home, they're going to be asleep. I wouldn't see them. So I think, that's one of the reasons why we all work hard, right? Is hopefully you can work at a place or work for someone in this industry that's going to create that. Hey, look, hey, coach, my son plays Friday night. Can I not be at the meetings and go to his game? Yeah, you should go. Or my daughter's got a recital. Can I go to that? You should go. But I think a lot of people in interview settings say that, but they don't really create it. They don't really create it. And we've worked really hard at it. And for me, that's what I want to do with my wife and kids. And if I'm going to provide that opportunity for my wife and kids, I want my assistants and staff to be able to do that too.
If you could go back and talk to the James Franklin that's taking the Penn State job in 2014, just leaving Vanderbilt, what advice would you give him right now?
That's a good question. I think the first thing is I should have studied more about the sanctions and really understood that in detail. Not only what it meant to the team, but also what it meant to the roster and have maybe more dialogue. I think the other thing is because I got the job so late, we were scrambling in recruiting at already a class, a team that only had 56 scholarship players. So like it was a scramble, but I probably didn't spend enough time with my current team.
Yeah.
And I think that's always a challenge, right? When a coach gets a new job, not only do you need to recruit the class that's coming in, you need to recruit your current team and you need to spend enough time. And it was magnified here because there'd been so much turnover that I needed to spend more time. That would probably be the biggest thing. And then be able to spend some time with guys like Scrap Bradley, Tom Bradley, Scrap, who was here forever, and be able to spend more significant time with him, or LeVar, who's upstairs right now. Yeah. Like, talk to me about Penn State and what do I really need to know to navigate this place, because all these places are sophisticated, and just because this is what we did at Vanderbilt That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work here. There's lessons you can take from there, but it better be specific to the job you got.
Last couple of things I got for you, Coach. We had Drew Allar on the podcast, and he was awesome. Talked to him for a while. Great kid, great personality, great mindset. I told him when I was talking to him, spending time around this community, I feel like there's as much expectation and excitement about this team than I can remember. I mean, there's so much excitement, so many people talking about this program, and excitement for Drew specifically. I mean, I was at the Coaches versus Cancer golf outing. Everyone's coming up to me. How's Drew Allar? How's Drew Allar? How do you handle that expectation with the team, but also Drew specifically, who hasn't started a game yet at Penn State, and yet everyone's so excited to see him?
Yeah, I think, outside of the Lash building, I try not to answer those questions. Yeah. Like, people are asking, and then I really just try to downplay it as much as possible. But inside the building, as you know, as a former player, we don't really talk about those things. Yeah. It's like, are we working the way we need to work? Are we preparing the way we need to prepare to do the things that we want to do, starting with West Virginia? Mm-hmm. Nothing else matters. If we're doing those things, the games take care of themselves. Does it help if you start higher, with where your rankings are? Yes, because if you're outside of the top 25, TCU was able to do it, but that's hard to do. Yeah. So I think the excitement is great, and there's a reason for that, right? We got a ton of really good players returning. We were able to end the season with a really good win on the road, essentially, at the Rose Bowl against a really good Utah team. I got a ton of respect for Coach Whittingham and what he's been able to do there. So there's a lot of momentum coming into the season, and then we had so many young players that played really well. And then you got a guy like Olu Fashanu who decides to come back. And then Drew, to your point, Drew gets in games last year, and you can do all the drills you want, but the thing that he showed is poise. He looked so comfortable when he was in there. And I'm talking like Purdue game 1 on the road in the Big Ten. So there's reasons for it, and I get it, but we just try to control the things that we can control, which is how we're working, how we're preparing, how we're building our chemistry as a team, and then go out and hopefully prove people right and prove some people wrong.
Yeah, I'm already asking you media type questions, aren't I?
Yeah. You're that guy. You're that guy. You changed
quickly.
Yeah.
Last thing I got for you is, if this place and this program is to win a national championship, get to the pinnacle, the goal you want, what are the 1 or 2 things that still need to happen?
When?
What's that?
You said if. When we do it?
When, yes.
Speak it into existence. Speak it into existence. So I think that for that to happen, it's the things that I'm talking about. We are better positioned to do those things right now than ever before. Yeah. Our staff, I feel as good about our staff as I have in a long time. When you're able to retain your staff, you're able to have the budget to retain your staff in terms of a returning offensive coordinator, a veteran established, proven offensive coordinator. Same thing at defense with Manny, and then same thing on special teams. There's no turnover. We've had some assistant turnovers, but not much. But in terms of what we do and how we do it, the players all know that. So we're able to hit the ground running. Alignment, if there's something we need and it's important and it's going to impact winning, I can make a call to Pat Kraft and it can go up the chain of command and we can get things done, and we can get things done quickly. One of the reasons we're having a great recruiting class, 2 of our top recruits met with Neely Bendapudi. Dr. Bendapudi, our president, she killed it. They committed, like literally that weekend. Like that alignment matters. So I just think we're better positioned than ever before. Really the one thing that's lagging that we got to get right is NIL. Yeah. And I think we're headed in the right direction, but also being willing to talk about it like this publicly. Yeah. Hopefully a bunch of Penn Staters, understand the importance of it.
Yeah. Well, Coach, I appreciate all your time. I could talk to you for 3 hours, but I
appreciate
appreciate
it.
your time in a busy month, and I'm excited to see you this season and see all the success you have, and appreciate all the things you've done for me and the relationship we have. So I appreciate
It's been awesome to see what you're doing and how you're doing it. I'm not surprised one bit. I also would like to invite you back during camp. Set up right up on our balcony overlooking the field, do your show. We'll give you access to a lot of people in the building. But I'm not surprised the success you're having, and we're happy and proud of you.
Appreciate it, Coach. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time. That was easy, right?
Yeah.
That's too bad.